All right, for decades, I mean decades, Alzheimer's disease has just been this huge unsolved puzzle. But what if a major clue was hiding in a place nobody really thought to look? I'm talking about your mouth. It sounds wild, I know, but we're going to follow the evidence and see just where this crazy lead takes us. Think about it for a second. What if a key to solving the whole Alzheimer's mystery is actually hidden right there in your mouth? It's a pretty startling idea, right? But it's at the very heart of some revolutionary new research. So let's put on our detective hats. We're going to trace the path from a really common mouth infection all the way into the brain. Okay, so here's how our investigation is going to go down. First, we'll look at the Alzheimer's amygdala itself. Then we'll zero in on a very unlikely culprit and see how it actually gets into the brain. After that, we'll check out its weapons of choice, uncover a huge plot twist, a real surprising one, and finally, we'll connect all the dots to figure out what this all means for you and your brain. All right, so for the longest time, when scientists thought about Alzheimer's, they were looking at one thing and one thing only, the brain. And they had a prime suspect, this sticky protein called amyloid beta. You've probably heard of it. The idea was that it clumps together, forms these plaques, and basically gums up the works in the brain. But there was a big problem with that theory. Yeah, so here's the thing. Drug after drug designed to get rid of these amyloid plaques, they just didn't work. They consistently failed to make a real difference in stopping or reversing the disease. And after so many failures, scientists had to step back and ask a really radical question. What if we've got it all wrong? What if the plaque isn't the cause of the disease, but just a symptom of something else entirely? And that, right there, is where our investigation takes a huge unexpected turn. So if the plaque isn't the bad guy we thought it was, then what is? Well, the search for that something else has led researchers to a really surprising place, our mouths. Specifically, that complex little world of bacteria living in there called the oral microbiome. And one particular condition has started to look very, very interesting. And that condition is periodontitis. You might know it as severe gum disease. But listen, this is way more than just your gums bleeding a little when you brush. We're talking about a chronic, simmering infection that actually destroys the stuff that holds your teeth in place. It creates these deep pockets around your teeth, and those pockets, they're the perfect hideout for some really nasty bacteria. And this brings us to our prime suspect. It's a bacterium with a mouthful of a name, Porphyromonas gingivalis. Let's just call it P. gingivalis. Now, this isn't just any old bug. Scientists call it a keystone pathogen. Think of it like the ringleader of a gang. It doesn't just cause trouble itself, it messes up the whole neighborhood, allowing all the other bad bacteria to take over and really drive that gum disease. But here's the scary part. Its influence doesn't stop there. Okay, so this is the million-dollar question, right? How on earth does a bug from your mouth get into the brain, which is supposed to be the most protected organ in the entire body? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but researchers have actually figured out two main ways it gets in. Route number one is the bloodstream. See, when your gums are all inflamed and bleeding, even something as simple as brushing your teeth can basically open up a little doorway for P. gingivalis to hop into your circulation. Once it's in, it can travel anywhere and it starts attacking the brain's main fortress wall, the blood-brain barrier. Then there's route number two, which is even more direct. This thing can actually hijack your cranial nerves, like the big trigeminal nerve that connects your face and jaw straight to your brain. It uses these nerves like a direct private highway, completely bypassing the blood-brain barrier. Pretty sneaky, right? So once our suspect has made it past security and is inside the brain, the crime scene, it doesn't just hang out. It opens up a whole toolkit of toxic weapons to start causing chaos. And these virulence factors, as scientists call them, are what make this bug so incredibly destructive. It's basically a three-pronged attack. First up, it uses these things called gingipans. You can think of them like destructive little molecular scissors. They're enzymes that just chew up important proteins. And get this, they can break down tau, which is the protein that basically holds the internal skeleton of our brain cells together. So they cause the cells to just collapse. Next, its outer shell is covered in something called LPS. These things are like little alarm bells that just will not shut up. They trigger the brain's immune system to go into a full-on, non-stop panic mode, causing all this chronic damage. And finally, it has a stealthy delivery system, outer membrane vesicles, or OMVs. These are its Trojan horses, little packages filled with those gingipans and LPS that it sends out to sneak their deadly cargo right into our brain cells. Okay, all of this evidence is pretty compelling, right? But this is where we get to the biggest plot twist in the whole story. And it's a twist that completely changes how we look at our original suspect in the Alzheimer's case, that amyloid plaque. So, for decades, the story has been that amyloid beta is just junk, toxic waste that gums up the brain. But what if that's not true? What if we've had it backwards this whole time? What if amyloid is actually in the brain for a reason? This is a massive shift in thinking. You've got the old view over here, amyloid is trash. But this new idea, the antimicrobial protection hypothesis, it flips the script entirely. It suggests that amyloid beta is actually a weapon. It's an ancient part of our immune system, like a natural antibiotic that the brain makes to fight off invaders. So here's the crucial part. When a bug like P. gingivalis gets into the brain fights back. It starts pumping out amyloid beta. The amyloid forms this sticky net that literally traps the bacteria, stops it in its tracks, and keeps it from spreading. So the plaque we see, it isn't the cause of the problem, it's the evidence of a battle being fought. It's the aftermath. The real tragedy is that with a chronic long-term infection from something like gum disease, the brain keeps sending out these amyloid shields over and over and over again. And eventually, all that defensive plaque builds up and causes massive collateral damage. Okay, let's bring it all home. We've seen all the evidence, so what's the verdict? Is there a real, tangible link between what's happening in our mouths and what's happening in our brains? Well, when you look at the data from big population studies, the answer is, yeah, pretty clear. Check this out. One major study found that people with a 10-year history of chronic gum disease had a 1.7 times, that's a 70% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. I mean, that is not a small number. That is a huge, statistically significant link. It tells us that your oral health is a serious risk factor for dementia, but it's also one you can actually do something about. So, let's wrap up our investigation. We've got our prime suspect, P. gingivalis, found right at the scene of the crime, inside the brains of Alzheimer's patients. We know its toxic weapons can kick off the inflammation, the plaques, and the tangles that define the disease. We have this whole new understanding that the plaques might actually be the brain defending itself, even if that defense ends up causing harm. And what does it all boil down to? A pretty powerful conclusion. Taking care of your mouth is one of the most important and actionable things you can do to help protect your brain. And that really leaves us with one last powerful thought. We always talk about diet and exercise and brain games for keeping our minds sharp. But what if one of the most important tools for your brain health is actually your toothbrush? It's kind of wild to think about. This is a really compelling new chapter in the fight against Alzheimer's, and it's just such a strong reminder of how everything in our body is connected in ways we're only just beginning to understand.